From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to the last presentation today at the Book Festival. I'm so excited to be here talking with all of you. I hope you enjoyed yourself. It was a busy, exciting day full of authors and storytellers. And they invited me here to close out the program talking about some of the innovative work that the Library of Congress is doing. So I'm here today to talk to you about this idea that we have in libraries about using collections as data. So as we collect more digital material and as we digitize more paper and tangible works, it's very easy to put those up as exact digital surrogates of the physical items. But we'd like to think creatively about what other possibilities are inherent in these things. And so I'll tell you a short story about using this concept of collections as data, starting with some of our friends, the very handsome founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. So if those of you who've seen Hamilton or remember anything about high school may remember the Federalist Papers, which were co-written by John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. And they were published under a pseudonym, Publius, and to try to persuade colonial citizens to ratify the Constitution. And when changing public opinion, converted these documents magically from anonymous trolling to foundational documents of the democracy. We started to get a sense of authorship of these papers, which founding fathers wrote which ones. After the dust settled, there were 12 that remained in dispute. Hamilton said that Madison wrote them. Madison said that he didn't have much to do with them. People generally thought Madison did write them. And why was there so much finger pointing? Well, these were propaganda pieces, and sometimes the authors took positions sort of for the sake of argument that they wouldn't have, that different from the positions they had publicly. So historical opinion over the years swung back and forth about who wrote the papers, depending on who was in favor in time and what pieces of historical evidence were coming to light. But in 1944, historian Douglas Adair did a comprehensive review of the historical document and determined that Madison probably wrote them. But he considered the historical evidence modest, so he sought another way of making an analysis. I really love this quote. Douglas Adair talked to two statisticians to see if there was a computational way to distinguish the authorship. So Frederick Mosteller and David Wallace were intrigued by this idea, and they decided to take on the challenge. And this quote is from the first paragraph of their book, which I encourage you to read if the story sounds interesting to you. It's very readable and very interesting. So they decided one way that they might be able to distinguish authorship between Hamilton and Madison would be to count sentence length and do an average. So they did this. They took a set of known Hamilton papers and a set of known Madison papers, and they laboriously counted sentence length and did some analysis. For example, they had to decide whether quoted sentences counted toward the average. And then after all this work, they came out with the answer, and it was an average sentence length of 34.5 words for Hamilton and 34.6 words for Madison. So that was a bust. The next they tried standard deviation. So they thought, even if the averages are the same, what if one author writes lots of average length sentences and the other author writes lots of teeny tiny sentences and lots of really long sentences? So they went back and they did all the counting again, crunched the numbers, and the average standard deviation for both authors was nearly identical as well. And it turns out they both were schooled in a certain style of writing that was popular in the time. So if they had talked to a historian about this, maybe that they could have gotten a head start on the research, but so that was kind of a bummer, and they shelved the project. A few years later, the original historian reached back out to say that he found a tool that might be useful. He found that while Hamilton uses the word while, Madison uses the word whilst. And that fact in itself is not enough to discriminate authorship. The word does not appear often enough. It doesn't even appear in all the Federalist Papers that were in dispute. But it gave them an idea of somewhere to start. So the statisticians in their lab counted word usage in a screening set of known Hamilton and known Madison papers. And you can imagine how laborious and exciting this would be as a project. So they had a screening set, they listed all the words, they counted how often they came up, and then they compared who used what words more often. And they determined which words were predictable discriminators against which words they called dangerously contextual, because they were associated with a subject favored by one author rather than part of their usage. And they ended up with 117 words to analyze. Using Bayesian analysis, raise your hand if you're a fan of Tommy Bayes. Who doesn't love Tommy Bayes? Using Bayesian analysis, they determine the probability of the authorship based on the number of times the words appear. And like I said, if you're interested in any of this, please read the book. It is a little bit heavy on the statistics, but it's fun and readable, and it's great. So they concluded, quote, our data independently supplement those of the historian. On the basis of our data alone, Madison is extremely likely, in the sense of a degree of belief, to have written the disputed Federalists. And what I really like about this is that none of this is digital. So when we talk about collections as data, it's really a concept that's existed for a very long time. We've been analyzing collections material as if they were data for a long time. But what's new now is that cheap and easy computing democratizes this. So this is available to curious people in their home or to journalists, and not just available to professors with large labs and grad students who can help do counting. In this example, our heroes spent years inventing this analysis. So this type of analysis had never been done before. But a lot of that time was in laboriously counting word frequencies and in hand calculating. And their data was limited by human scale. And what I'd like for you to do is imagine what we could do if we had computation and cheaper data and faster analysis. So to bring this story around to Harry Potter, which I think is important to do in any talk, this sort of linguistic analysis has gone from cutting edge to now very common. So a few years ago, a computer scientist, Patrick Jola, got a call from a reporter who was reading the new mystery writer Robin Galbraith and got a tip that might be Harry Potter. But he needed more evidence to prove that was true. So he asked the computer scientist to do the same kind of analysis. And the computer scientist did, and it proved that Robin Galbraith was really Harry Potter. And he did that, in a couple of days instead of a series of years. And his code is now available for anybody to use. And that brings us back to today. So one of the things we're exploring at the Library of Congress is how we can enable this sort of research through the ways we're providing collections, through training, and through events. And we've hosted a series of symposiums for people to come and talk about their work and talk about the challenges and opportunities inherent in computational analysis of collections. And if you're interested, you can Google that term, and you'll see the summaries of those days, and also the talks are available. So I want to talk a little bit about my group, National Digital Initiatives. We're very inspired by our new boss, Dr. Carla Hayden. She's leading the library strongly in a direction of opening up the collections. She talks about this place lovingly like the American people's treasure chest that she's helping to crack open. And we in NDI see it as our duty to make this happen for digital and digitized collections. And I'd like to tell you about a few things we're working on. The first is crowdsourcing. So we're working to expand the library's ability to learn from our users to more digital platforms. And this is a screenshot of a project that was built by Tong Wang, who is a developer at the Library of Congress, while he was on a fellowship in my team, National Digital Initiatives. And this is a tool. Can we go back? This is a tool that invites the public to identify pictures and cartoons in historic newspapers and help us caption them. This will give us two things: better findability, because captions are historically optical character recognition does not work very well on them, but also we'll have a data set that we can use to give to researchers. So if a researcher is interested, for example, in World War I era cartoons, will be able to serve that. We're excited that we're going to launch this in a couple of weeks as a beta application, so please stay tuned, and hopefully you'll be able to contribute. This isn't the only crowdsourcing project we're working on, but some of those details I'll have to save for later. But there are this is going to supplement the library's program of crowdsourcing, including Flickr, the American Archive of Public Broadcasting game, and efforts in the Law Library and World Digital Library. Another thing we're working on is a congressional data contest. So our CIO, Bud Barton, announced at this year's Legislative Data and Transparency Conference that we'll be hosting a competition for creative use of legislative data. And we'll be announcing more of the details in a couple of weeks. But it will invite the public to take legislative and congressional information and think of creative ways to analyze or present that information. And we're hoping that it spurs people to interact with the information that we're making available and also with the legislative and a democratic process. I'm really excited to announce this next thing. We are working to launch labs.loc.gov in a few weeks, which we hope will be a place for play and innovation with the collections. It will be our home, NDI's home, so you'll be able to follow some of our work if that's what you're interested in there. And we'll host things like results from our hackathons and fellowships. And this is a particular image of one of our hackathons, which I really like. Are any of you programmers in the audience? So for those of you who are not programmers, you may watch movies and programming looks like this. But in real life, it looks mostly like this. And so I think this is a very good image of programmers at work. A few more things. I'd like to mention the Kluge Fellowship in Digital Studies. So if you are interested in academic research and would like to do that at the library, and you're specifically interested in studying the impact of the digital revolution on society, we invite you to apply for a Kluge Fellowship. The applications are due December 6th, so you have some time to get your materials in order. And more than one can be awarded in a year, so share it with your friends if you think they might be interested. Lastly, I want to mention a program NDI has been working on to bring in exciting people to the Library of Congress for short-term, high-impact projects. We call it the Innovator in Residence program. We're wrapping up some details on this year's fellowship, and we should have more to announce soon. So thank you for coming, and thank you for listening to my talk at the end of a very long day. It's lovely to see all your smiling faces. It's just the cap on a wonderful and exciting afternoon. If you're interested in the work that we're doing in National Digital Initiatives, please go to blogs.loc.gov/thesignal, and you can follow us there, and we'll be posting all of our new and exciting projects as we launch them. And I'd be pleased to take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you. Ma'am. Yeah, so the question is, instead of doing targeted sharing, are we doing anything at the higher level, so making the Library of Congress collections more broadly available? And I think one of the things I'm super excited about with Labs is we are having a page on that called LC for Robots. And it will be a listing of all the APIs and bulk data that's available from the Library of Congress, along with contextual information. So you'll understand, I mean, I think from the outsider's perspective, we have Chronicling America, which is this wonderful website filled with 12 million digitized historic newspapers. And we have loc.gov, where you can get prints and photographs and manuscript collections, and how do those two things interrelate? And I think it can be very intimidating, and also it's hard for someone to get a comprehensive view. So I hope you'll check that out and make some good use of it. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have introduced myself at the start of the talk. My name is Kate Zwaard. I am the Chief of National Digital Initiatives at the Library of Congress, and I started here as a programmer, and I ran the repository development group for a while until this new team was started, and they asked me to lead it. Anybody else? Thank you so much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.